All right. So we got the audience. Let's see if that works better. Not gonna do like that. Alrighty. All right. So, in 1971, a young man named David Keaton was accused of murdering an off-duty sheriff's officer during a robbery. David was sentenced to death and served 2 years on death row before he was found innocent because his DNA didn't match the DNA at the crime scene. David was the lucky one. He was one of the people that was able to escape death row because he was an innocent man. But we have no way of knowing how many other people weren't so lucky and were wrongly put to death, like David was about to be. So that leads me to today's discussion. Today I'm going to be talking about why the United States should outlaw the death penalty. I feel like I am qualified to talk about this subject because I'm a man of faith, and I believe that God is the only person that can put someone onto this world, and he should be the only person that can take someone out. So for those reasons, I think that I'm qualified to talk about this. So the points that I'm going to be talking about that explain why the death penalty should be outlawed is, first one is it cannot be undone once it's done. It's not economically worth it. Doesn't change the outcome of the crime, and it only causes unnecessary grieving. And finally, it targets minorities, people with mental problems, and people of low income. So my first point is that once it's done, it can't be undone. Like we saw in David's case, he was almost sentenced to death, and he was close to being killed, but luckily the evidence came out where it showed that he was innocent. But if someone were to be killed and then maybe 5 years down the line they find out that, oh, he actually didn't do that, you can't undo what you've already done. The person will always still be dead, and he would have been wrongfully killed. If someone's just in prison for life, then they can be released and they can live the rest of their life. But once someone's dead, they're dead. There's nothing you can do about that. My next point is that it's not economically worth it to sentence someone to death. According to criminalinjusticedegree.com, it costs $2.3 million to sentence someone to death and kill them in the state of Texas. The reason it's so expensive is because after someone is sentenced to death, they have to go through more trials, and the state has to hire more attorneys and lawyers to make sure that the person who's being killed has actually done what they've done. And as we've seen in the past with many other cases, sometimes people slip through the cracks, and they're not always the murderers that they're accused of being. So to give you an idea of how much more that is, it's 3 times more expensive to kill someone through execution than it is to make them serve the rest of their lives in jail. So that's why it's not economically friendly. My third point is that the outcome of the whole situation, killing someone won't bring the victim back to life. And despite some people think that it gives closure to the victim's family, most victims' families end up forgiving the people that have killed their family member. And a lot of times they feel sorry for the person being put to death. So, closure really isn't always something that is necessary to some of these families. Sometimes they're all right with the person living. A lot of times they want the person to actually live. So, and the other part of that is that it creates a lot of unnecessary grieving in addition to the grieving that's already going on. You have the family whose family member's already been killed, and you also now are going to kill another person, which is going to make a lot of extra grieving to the inmate's family that isn't necessary. To show you how bad the situation is and how bad people can feel during this, I got this picture. This is where the person is executed, and their family a lot of times has to watch them being executed. So that's just a really bad way to go out, and I couldn't imagine being a family member having to watch my son or my brother be executed. My final point is the death penalty oftentimes targets minorities, people of color, and people from lower income. According to Mental Health America, up to 10% of death row inmates have a severe mental disability. So obviously, for whatever reason, a lot more people with mental disabilities are put on to death row than there aren't. So by eliminating this, a lot of times you don't have to worry about people who maybe aren't really healthy in their minds. You don't have to worry about them being executed for something that really sometimes they can't control. Another fact about minorities being targeted is African Americans make up 40% of death row inmates, despite only making up 30% of the United States population. 13%, sorry, of the United States population. A lot of times you'll hear people saying that people of color are given harder punishments or more severe punishments than someone would be if they were, for example, white. So obviously, a lot of facts point to this could actually be the case. And by eliminating the death row penalty, the death row and eliminating the death penalty, it kind of gets rid of the chance of someone being put to death just because of their race and just because they have darker skin than someone who doesn't. And by getting rid of it, you eliminate that problem. Finally, according to the United Nations, poor people are much more commonly found on death row because a lot of times they can't afford the better representation that people with more money can. So a lot of times they end up, with less known lawyers, less experienced lawyers, who a lot of times will forget to bring up important parts of the case and can ultimately lead to a poor person being killed while a rich person may not. So in conclusion, we talked about why the death row should be gone. You can't undo it. It's not worth it economically. It doesn't change the outcome of the crime, and it targets minority groups. So what can you do to change this? Many states have already outlawed the death row penalty, and it's up to us as citizens to reach out to our congressmen, to reach out to the people that are making these laws, and tell them that we don't want this, and it's important to make sure your voice is heard. So after hearing these things, I hope that you do reach out and talk about this with your congressman and ask them to make laws against this. Thank you.